There is no quorum requirement for the public meeting of council. You can proceed with opening the public meeting.
Thank you very much. So this is our public meeting for the Regional Official Plan Amendment for November 4th, 2021. And I'd like to call this public meeting to order. This meeting is now open and is being held pursuant to sections 17 and 26 of the Planning Act as amended. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed PL2051 Regional Official Plan Review and Municipal Comprehensive Review MCR Amendment. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the lands on which we gather and on which the region of Peel operates is part of the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Please note that the name of persons providing oral or written submissions at this meeting will appear on the agenda and report of the public meeting of Regional Council. The agendas and report of the public meeting will appear on the Region of Peel website as a public record of these proceedings. All postings are in compliance with the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The proposed Regional Official Plan Amendment, ROPA, R-O-P-A, under Section 26 of the Planning Act applies to all lands within the boundary of the Regional Municipality of Peel, and Section 17 applies to any such amendment or repeal. The purpose of the ROPA is to update the Regional Official Plan to ensure conformity to current provincial plans, policies, and legislation. In keeping with the Planning Act, the region must update its official plan every 5 years to stay current with provincial policy changes and reflect our community's needs. The official plan is also being updated to reflect the planning horizon of 2051. The effect of the proposed ROPA is to add new and updated policies and mapping on the various focus areas identified through the MCR. This includes policies on settlement area boundary expansion, growth management, climate change, major transit station areas, housing, green land systems, provincial greenbelt plans, Indigenous engagement, cultural heritage, and waste management. The public is invited to provide input on matters relating to the proposed ROPA. Adrian Smith, Chief Planner and Director of Planning and Development Services for the Region of Peel, will provide introductory remarks and a brief presentation. Following this presentation, there will be an opportunity for persons and/or public bodies to make oral submissions on the matter or to ask questions of staff. Any person or public body may make written submissions to the Council before a plan is adopted. We are requesting that written comments on the draft Regional Official Plan be submitted by November 30, 2021 through peelplan@peelregion.ca. Again, that's by November 30, 2021 at the address Plan Peel, that's Plan Peel, peelregion.ca, so that staff can consider and include the comments with responses in the final report back to Council. The purpose of this meeting is to provide the public with an opportunity to make representations before Regional Council in respect of the proposed ROPA required as part of the Official Plan Review and MCR. There will be no debate or discussion on the proposed amendment or the public comments presented today at this meeting. No decision will be made at this meeting. I want to repeat that. No decisions will be made at this meeting. Delegations are permitted to speak once. After a delegation has completed its presentations, members shall each have an opportunity and one opportunity to ask questions of the delegation for clarification purposes only and without debate. If the delegate's answer to the clarifying question raises a further clarifying question, a member shall have the opportunity for one further clarifying question. When all members who have indicated a desire to ask clarifying questions have finished, the persons appearing as delegations are invited to listen to the balance of the public meeting through the live stream on Peel's website. Should the person and/or public bodies that provided oral submissions have further comments, they are requested to send it to planpl@plregion.ca, again by November 30th, 2021. Councillors will be able to discuss the amendment as well as any comments or concerns raised by the public here today when staff report back to a future meeting of Regional Council. Today is a public meeting to which Council has been invited. This is the public's opportunity to be heard. This public meeting is being live streamed. In order to ensure that the meeting remains accessible to the public, a 15-minute recess will be called if the live stream is interrupted or fails. Staff will work to get the live stream up and running as soon as possible, and we will keep council advised. So my first official item, I call on the regional clerk to advise of the requirements and the method by which notice of this meeting was given and confirm the dates that the notices were given. Regional Clerk Lockyer, please.
Thank you. Notice of the public meeting was given in accordance with sections 17 and 26 of the Planning Act as amended and Ontario Regulation 54306 by publication in the following news media having general circulation in the region of Peel: the Brampton Guardian, October 7th, 2021. Mississauga News, October 7, 2021. Caledon Enterprise, October 7, 2021, and the Caledon Citizen, October 7, 2021. The notice of public meeting was posted on the region's website as of October 6, 2021, and the draft ROPA was available to the public online as of October 7, 2021. In accordance with Section 17 of the Planning Act as amended, statutory open houses were also held on October 26 and October 27, 2021, online from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Further, notice of the public meeting was given to the prescribed persons and public bodies as required by Sections 17 and 26 of the Planning Act as amended and in accordance with Ontario Regulation 54306. Any person who would like to be notified of Council's decision on the proposed Regional Official Plan Amendment should give their full name, address, postal code, and telephone number in writing by email to regional.clerk@plregion.ca. That's regional.clerk@plregion.ca. Those who are listening online who wish to speak are requested to please send an email to regional.clerk@plregion.ca. regional.clerk@plregion.ca. If you are speaking on behalf of a special interest group, please identify the group prior to speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So now at this time, I would like to emphasize that the proposal before the public is in draft form and relates to the proposed regional plan official amendments and MCR for Peel Region 2051. I now call on Adrian Smith, Chief Planner and Director of Planning and Development Services, to explain the proposed regional official plan amendment. Mr. Smith, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the entire team working on the PL 2051 official plan review and providing this overview of the draft amendment and the implementation of our municipal comprehensive review process. So, next slide, please. My presentation today is going to concentrate on some of the key policy directions and recommendations that will actually amend or replace sections of the region's official plan. This current statutory consultation phase of the required planning process is, as is mentioned, required under the Planning Act, and it really is an opportunity to hear more feedback from the public and from our stakeholders on the draft official plan policies and mapping before making our final recommendations as regional staff to council early next year. Just a reminder that the province is ultimately the approval authority for the municipal comprehensive review, and appeal rights on the municipal comprehensive review are fairly limited and only come into application if the province does not make a decision within 120 days after council adoption. The next slide, please. So as noted by the clerk, here's some of the notification that's been provided in accordance with the Planning Act, of course. And next slide, please. So leading up to this point, there have been many opportunities for public and stakeholder input. Over 60 events have been held. And one of the key recent engagement examples is an online survey asking people to let us know what's important to them. And, similar to what we've heard from other consultations, in this survey, there were over 500 respondents to date. And the top 3 topics that have been identified as either important or very important to people has been protection and enhancements of the natural environment, protection of rural areas and farmland, and addressing climate change. So we've heard that consultation feedback. We've also recently heard from folks through the 2 recent open houses held last week. And I was going to mention that we've also scheduled some informal in-person drop-in events for later in November, and those are being advertised as we speak. So next slide, please. So the official plan review is being undertaken in accordance with Section 26 of the Planning Act, and it does. Planning Act does require that MCRs be undertaken periodically, really to ensure that conformity with the latest provincial official policy plans and legislation and the policies of the province. And that's what we're carrying out through this review, as well as responding to regional priorities and what we've heard from stakeholders. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of the PL2051 Amendment is to comprehensively update or replace the official plan policies. Really, the amendment will update and modernize land use and infrastructure policies that guide decision-making in the region and they will provide a strong policy framework to sustain the region's social, economic, and environmental well-being and meet the needs of a growing and diverse population. And I'm going to talk about some of the specifics of that in the upcoming slides. The last update to PEEL's official plan is now well over a decade old, and we know that the needs and priorities of our communities have changed, along with our understanding and how we want to respond to issues like climate change, natural heritage protection, and transportation planning. So the current plan also only incorporates a planning horizon of 2031, and at that time there was a projected population of about 1.6 million people for PEEL, and we're about to hit that mark fairly shortly now. And this update will ensure that we're meeting our obligations as a region to plan for the long term and implement provincial policy while responding to the different and newer priorities that the region has, as well as what we're hearing from the public and stakeholders and Indigenous communities. Next slide, please. In terms of a timeline, we have been at this for a number of years with various adjustments to the scope and timing as the provincial plan policies have evolved in recent years, and the growth forecasts in the province have evolved. To that end, we've seen the name of the review evolve from originally PL 2041 to PL 2041 plus to now PL 2051, which acknowledges the 2051 planning horizon that municipalities must abide by, as introduced last year by the province. Also, in terms of timeline, we anticipate making our final recommendations to Regional Council early in 2022. We continue to welcome comments, and will, in our recommendations, respond to and may likely make some revisions in response to those comments. The province does require, however, that the MCR be completed by July 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. So these are the key focus areas that make up the review that I'm going to be speaking about. And just to note that the age-friendly planning and healthy and built environment policies, healthy development and built environment policies, were approved back in 2017. So those are already in place, with the remainder underway. Next slide. So the PL 2051 project website is the best location to seek out and find really detailed information about the official plan review. Full copies of all the technical background papers, discussion papers are all available. And also, if you're looking for more comprehensive summary information, the website also includes one-page fact sheets on each of the focus areas, virtual display boards. There's also available there contact information for the planning staff leads who are leading the elements of the review under each focus area. And very much welcome folks to reach out and contact and engage with and ask questions or provide feedback to those focus leads as well. Next slide. Um, as the clerk mentioned, and as required by provincial legislation, a draft of the regional official plan is available, and it's located in the draft policies and mapping tab on the project website. The actual policies and policy changes that are recommended that I'm going to summarize today are proposed throughout all 7 chapters of the official plan, and in that document they're shown as track changes to clearly indicate what are proposed updates, what are additions, deletions, replacements. So you can go there if you want to see the details of the actual policy language. Next slide, please. This slide also sort of gives a snapshot of some of the examples of the numerous schedules and figures that are included as part of the official plan updates. The schedules are actually considered, officially part of the official plan itself, whereas figures are provided for information and are not formally part of the plan. And these schedules and figures are also available on the website. In the case of some, for example, the Greenlands system mapping, there's an interactive map available as well, where you can drill down and look at the actual details through drilling down it through an interactive map format. Next slide, please. So what we've heard through the consultation is also very consistent with the key themes that are now embedded in our work, and they're highlighted on this slide. It includes addressing climate change, natural heritage, agricultural, rural landscapes, addressing fiscally sustainable growth, healthy, complete communities, affordable housing, changing nature of work, active transportation. So these are the themes that you'll see embedded as I go through each focus area. Next slide, please. We have categorized the focused areas into different categories. Environment is one, and growth management is another group. So I'm going to start off with the next few slides covering the environmental focused areas. Next slide. So addressing climate change has been a really important theme from the outset of the review. Draft climate change policies have been embedded throughout all the different theme areas. Climate change is also now addressed in a new section of the plan that includes broad climate goals, policy directions on the requirements to conduct greenhouse gas inventories, undertake adaptation planning, and emissions reduction planning throughout our processes. We have applied a climate lens to the different growth management components of the review as well. And as a result of the emphasis on more compact, complete, transit supportive, built form, emphasis on sustainable modes of transportation, implementation of alternative and renewable energy sources or systems, watershed planning, protection and enhancement of natural systems. So all of these elements are embedded, and that's flowing from our climate change emphasis that has been there from the outset of the plan. Next slide, please. Protecting water resources is a key part of the region's environmental planning direction. Changes and updates to the water resources system policies are provided in a new section, which includes requirements to protect and improve and restore vulnerable and sensitive water and groundwater resources, requiring the identification of water resource systems and features in areas, and requiring more innovative approaches to stormwater management and stormwater management practices. The update also includes new mapping of water resource system areas, wellhead protection areas, and hydrogeologic areas, and that basically also incorporates the implementation of source water protection plans, which is a new requirement for official plans in response to the Clean Water Act. So that's all embedded in the policy updates. Next slide, please. Updates to the way that the policy framework addresses Greenland systems is also provided, and there's a transition from a features-based approach to a more systems-based approach to the natural heritage system. New policy sections and definitions provide stronger direction to local municipalities to identify, protect, and restore and enhance the Greenland system in the local official plans through the local planning process. And there's also updated mapping to the Greenland system in the official plan as well. Next slide, please. There's very specific updates to the provincial green belt sections of the plan in order to ensure that conformity with the most recent provincial changes to those plans. And of course, that includes the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan, and the Green Belt Plan. Next slide. So key changes to the agriculture and rural system policies include new definitions and permissions for agriculture or related and non-farm diversified uses, new requirements for agricultural impact assessments, and policies to promote economic development in the agri-food sector, urban agriculture, and provision of access to locally grown and healthy food. Provincial mapping of prime agricultural areas has been refined, and that's based on a land evaluation and area review, or a LEAR study, that's resulted in some local refinements to the provincial agricultural mapping and a new rural systems map. Next slide, please. So next, I'm just going to cover the growth management focus areas. Next slide. The growth management focus area really sets the policy framework that's going to guide where and how the additional 700,000 people and 330,000 jobs that have been allocated to Peel by the province will be accommodated over the planning horizon, the next 30 years to 2051. And this amount of growth is actually just slightly less than the amount of growth Peel has seen over the last 30 years, which is about 820,000 people from 1991 to 2021. Next slide, please. So a land needs assessment was undertaken, or an LNA, based on the methodology that is required by the province. The LNA allocates population and employment to local municipalities to that 2051 planning horizon, and it sets an intensification rate, densities, it identifies planned mix of housing, and plans for different types of employment. So the LNA that has been carried out for Peel, it does confirm a requirement for a new settlement area of about 4,400, I should say, hectares. And about 3,000 of that is for new residential and community development, and about 1,400 hectares for prime employment areas. So although this settlement expansion is required, as demonstrated by the LNA, it's important to note that that LNA does emphasize that about 75% of all residential growth is to be accommodated within the designated urban areas, which is about 500,000 people. The recommended allocation also emphasizes intensification while providing a balanced housing mix to meet the needs of Peel households and going forward in the future. Next slide, please. Now I see I've got a bit of background noise. Hopefully I'm still coming through clearly. Is that?
Yes, you're good. Carry on.
I'm good. Okay, if it is an issue, just give me a signal. I've got my headset here I can use as well. Great. So one component of the growth management focus area includes identifying and planning for employment areas in the region. And the map here up on the screen does identify the employment areas, sort of existing employment areas that we're identifying to be protected through the official plan, as well as new employment areas that are proposed through the settlement boundary expansion work. Staff are also evaluating almost 50 conversion requests where conversion of employment lands to non-employment uses has been requested. To date, we've received about 50 of those, and information about our assessment of each of those is also available on the website. We have received more recently a handful of additional requests, and we are reviewing those, and we'll be continuing to review those over the next few months before making our recommendations back. Next slide, please. So we do recognize the importance of providing attainable housing for Peel residents, and the draft policies do support this by providing for a real range of housing options, including ownership options and rental options and different densities and forms of housing. Draft policies also support and set strong needs-based targets to measure the provision of affordable housing, including protection for rental housing and increasing the protections on those and supporting that higher development, higher density development that can help meet the needs of residents. One of the examples of the new tools that are introduced to the official plan is to help address affordable housing needs is inclusionary zoning. And policies in the regional plan and ultimately additional policies that will be reflected in the local plans will require that a portion of affordable housing units be provided by developments that are located in major transit station areas. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our major transit station area planning in a moment. Next slide. The draft transportation policies focus on increasing the percentage of travel by sustainable modes of transportation. And really that goal is supported by a policy framework that recognizes that simply continued widening of roads isn't feasible or desirable. We know that some limited road widenings will be necessary, and that'll continue to be the case. But the policies really focus on maximizing the use of sustainable modes, increasing the use of walking, transit, and cycling, and carpooling to meet our transportation needs and maximize the use of existing infrastructure on that basis. Also to note, earlier this year, Council did withdraw the region's support for the GTA West Highway. And in light of this, transportation mapping and policies do continue to protect for the GTA West transportation corridor itself as required by provincial policy. However, the policies that would have previously expressed support for the highway have been revised to encourage consideration of alternative forms of transportation to meet the transportation needs, such as transit and active transportation and urban boulevards, that kind of alternative. Next slide, please. The draft policies and mapping, as I mentioned, do identify and protect for major transit station areas, or MTSAs as we call them, to ensure that they are developed at higher densities with a mix of land uses, well served by transit. And although the draft policies do set sort of minimum densities, and in the regional plan will identify boundaries for primary and secondary MTSAs, a more detailed planning is required to be undertaken by the local municipalities to really establish that character and vision for each of these station areas. And that's to follow. Next slide, please. The map actually shows 91 MTSAs that are proposed in Peel. And the green ones on the map identify the primary stations, and the yellow identifies the secondary stations. And the white circles that you see there, the circles do represent planned stations. And we recognize is that for those planned stations, the delineation of those will come in the future once more detailed information is available. For where there are delineations available for those primary and secondary stations, this map is very general, but on our website there's a detailed map of each of those that stakeholders can take a look at as well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to move on and talk about our settlement boundary expansion, or SABE, focus area of the review. And the draft policies associated with this element implement the results of 12 supporting technical studies that were undertaken, and they reflect some of the comments that we received from stakeholders, and the actual policies will guide the future development as that SABE unfolds. One key element of the draft policies is to ensure that the region does retain a strong role in the phasing of development for settlement expansion lands to really reflect the provision of regional infrastructure and other infrastructure, and to ensure fiscal sustainability of municipalities as things go forward. Some of the other SABE policy areas include development of complete compact communities, protection and management of resources, responding to climate change, in terms of addressing emissions reduction planning and adaptation, upfront planning for transit and goods movement, and future corridor, future vehicular movement, and advancing housing objectives, especially around affordable housing. Next slide, please. So the actual draft settlement boundary expansion included in the draft amendment is shown on this map. And the red hatched areas show the proposed community areas, and the blue hatched areas show the proposed employment areas. It's certainly our view that the land use configuration shown here works well to accommodate growth, and that includes whether there's ultimately a highway solution to the GTA West corridor or other options. The concept is really supported by those technical studies that I mentioned, and it implements the results of the land needs assessment that I noted. Really, the concept logically expands on the existing communities of Mayfield West and Bolton, and optimizes the strategic use of infrastructure, both existing and planned. It's based on a density target of 65 people and jobs per hectare across the SABE, and an intensification target for the region of 55%. And those targets do exceed the provincial minimum set out in the growth plan. They really, the policies and the proposed boundaries really do provide a framework for Caledon to develop compact and complete communities served by transit, but also providing flexibility for Caledon to plan communities based on the local characteristics and goals and objectives, and providing an opportunity for transition ultimately to the greenbelt to the north, and agricultural lands surrounding. Next slide, please. We've also received, I think, over 16 specific requests for settlement expansion in the Greenbelt, and we do recognize that some minor expansion of existing rural settlements is permitted by the Greenbelt plan, but it's subject to very, very stringent requirements. In this case, we're not recommending that any of these be moved forward for approval. We have, however, identified two opportunities, I guess, for further investigation, and those opportunities are based on some specific unique circumstances on the ground, and the two examples are noted on the slide here. Next slide, please. Updated policies on cultural heritage are included, and the draft policies also are provided on Indigenous engagement and recognizing the important role of Indigenous communities in the land use planning process, and providing some specific background and guidance to that in the official plan. Next slide, please. Updates to waste management policies reflect changing provincial framework in that space, and also implement the region's long-term waste management strategy. And just a couple of other things to note. We are including enhanced opportunities for broadband and pipeline infrastructure, including objectives in the plan on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and updating some mapping to reflect some of the historic, or update some of the historic rural settlement area boundaries, and reflect sort of the proper boundaries in our mapping. Next slide, please. So for next steps, responses to comments made through this process and any revisions will be, we hope to be bringing that forward with a recommendation report to Council for adoption of the Regional Official Plan Amendment in early 2022. Following adoption, a notice would be issued, and the amendment submitted to the province for approval, hopefully prior to the conformity deadline of July 2022. As was noted, we're requesting comments by November 30th, so that we have a chance to consider those before reporting back. And we're also having those planned supplementary in-person drop-in sessions for information. Those sessions would be by registration, and as I mentioned, the notice of those is going out as we speak. And then the last slide. So just to conclude, I'm really confident that the recommendations contained in the PL2051 amendment do provide that strong, professional, evidence-based framework to guide PL's long-term planning, and it does respect the results of the consultation to date, and we'll continue to do that, and it properly responds to the uncertainties that are at hand in planning for the long term. And we look forward to continuing to receive and address the comments through the process. And with that, I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for a chance to provide this overview of the amendment.
Adrian, thank you very much. Well done in such a compressed period of time to get so much information out there. So we now turn to the public participation component of our meeting, and I want to address oral submissions. I request that all persons wishing to address the proposal or ask questions make representations through the chair. Any presentations received after the revised agenda distribution on November 1st that relate to the oral submissions at today's meeting will be considered as accompanying materials to those submissions. And at this point in the normal meeting process where we'd see you face to face, I would ask if there's any other persons that wishes to make an oral submission. Of course, I don't see you in the council chamber, but if I can hear you, I'll acknowledge you. Otherwise, you will virtually let yourself be known at the addresses we've given out to our clerks and staff, the administrative staff we have here, and they will advise me accordingly if there are any other persons that wish to make an oral submission. With regards to written submissions, to date we have received 32 written submissions.
Chair Unica, if I may interrupt,
Yes,
I'm sorry. We do have the 5 people that are wanting to delegate to today's meeting. They're on the...
My apologies, and I acknowledge those as being on my agenda. So, of course, I do have 5 that I have acknowledged that have gone through the process to be here, and they will be delegating shortly as per our agenda. I should have made that clear, Madam Clerk. Thank you. And in addition to that, in speaking to additional written submissions, we already have 32. And if there are other written additional submissions to be presented at this time, those written submissions can be made at any time to the regional clerk at regional.clerk@plregion.ca up to until the close of today's public meeting. I'm going to say that one more time. Any additional written submissions can be made at any time to the regional clerk at regional.clerk@plregion.ca up to and until the close of today's public meeting. Any written submissions received after the public meeting can be submitted through planpeel@plregion.ca up to November 30th, 2021. With that, Madam Clerk, and thank you for reminding me, we now go to the public participation of oral submissions from my list of delegates who have signed to speak to us. The first delegate that I have for their oral submission is Delegate 6-1, Matthew Corey, Principal, Malone Givens Parsons, on behalf of Brook Valley Project Management, Inc., providing comments on the PL 2051 Settlement Area Boundary Expansion and Land Needs Assessment Report. Mr. Corey.
Good afternoon, Chair Ayanna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Please proceed.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair and members of Council. Greatly appreciate the ability to speak before you today. As Chair Ayanna mentioned, my name is Matthew Corey. I'm a principal with the planning firm Malone Given Parsons. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of Brook Valley Project Management, Inc., who owns 6 parcels in what is Mayfield West and what we term Mayfield West Phase 2, Stage 3. These are the lands generally south and east of Old School and Chinguacousy. We've been involved and I've been monitoring the official plan review since it began. And the first thing I'd like to do today is just to thank the staff for all their hard work. These have been incredibly difficult times through the pandemic. And I think your staff and their consultant team have done an excellent job of sharing the work that they've been doing as it's been prepared and providing timely and many virtual opportunities for comment and public discussion. I've attended at least 5 of these. And I would say that the work being done by Peel in this regard stands out again, beyond all the other regions in terms of reaching out to people during this time. And I think also the hard work by your staff stands out in the fact that you have now we have a draft official plan that we're to provide comments on by November 30th. And I think you're the first region in the GTHA to have a draft official plan of this kind to the 2051 horizon. So I think that speaks well and fairly of your staff and the consultant team and all the hard work they've been doing. As I mentioned, we made a number of submissions, and believe many of our comments have been actually addressed by staff. Again, we want to thank the staff for looking at the settlement area boundary expansion being proposed in and around this area and including our clients' lands within that boundary expansion, which we had requested and we believe is very good planning and makes a lot of good sense to finish off the historically planned Mayfield West study area. And strongly commend them for that and also express our support for that to be maintained through the remainder of the process. We are currently reviewing the draft official plan It's quite a lengthy document, of course, and we will be providing our written comments by November 30th. But there are two comments I would like to convey to the region today to consider as you continue to prepare the draft official plan. So the first is, as part of the background work prepared for the 2051 official plan, the region had prepared and the staff have prepared background tables in terms of the timing of growth in the region. So with this regard, we strongly believe that the Mayfield West study area has a long history of planning and represents the logical completion of existing neighborhoods and communities. Stages 1 and 2, which are respectively identified as planning community areas C30 and 31 of the Mayfield West Phase 2 community, are currently either under construction or are proceeding through the development approvals process. The completion of the Mayfield West Phase 2 Stage 3 community, which is the area earmarked for settlement expansion by staff in the draft official plan, which is also planning community area number 32, should be prioritized, in our opinion, in advance of any newer expansion areas elsewhere to allow for the continuity of planning and the logical completion of that community. In a similar vein, we think other areas with similar long-standing planning history and intention to accommodate growth, which would include the Bolton residential expansion lands in ROPA 30, should also be prioritized in the phasing of growth in the region to 2041, with newer expansion areas following as subsequent phases to post 2041. So basically, we're asking that the timing of growth anticipated for C32 be advanced, so the majority of it would be occurring prior to 2031, which we think is good planning and makes sense. Secondly, the other matter is that we understand why staff have removed the GTA West corridor from the proposed settlement area boundary, but would request that a proposed land use be shown as an overlay to these lands, which in the case of my client's lands would be a community area overlay. And the reason we're asking for this is that should the highway not ultimately proceed, if the province doesn't ultimately proceed with this work, this would provide clarity as to the land use that would otherwise function as a gap in the settlement area with nothing on it denoting what the land use should be. So we would also ask you to consider in this regard that should the highway not occur, there also be a policy put in place anticipating this instance that permits settlement area boundary expansions outside of the municipal comprehensive review, which is permitted under the growth plan, onto those lands should the highway not proceed, to give some clarity as we go forward to account for whichever way the highway goes. So with that, Chair Ayanna, those are my comments for today. Again, really grateful to you and your staff for all their hard work. And I'm available to obviously answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you for your presentation. I call for any questions at this time. I see none on my list. So with no questions, I will thank you for your presentation. I move on to our next delegate, 6-2, Keith McKinnon, partner, KLM Planning Partners, Inc., on behalf of Metris Central Properties, providing comments on the proposed regional official plan amendment related to land zoned by Metris Central Properties and the proposed land designations within the regional comprehensive review. Keith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of Regional Council, staff, and members of the public. As stated, my name is Keith McKinnon. I'm a partner with KLM Planning Partners, Inc. Here before you this afternoon on behalf of Metris Central Properties, Inc. and Tesh Development, Inc., care of DG Group. We have prepared a short presentation for you this afternoon just to help illustrate sort of what we want to provide to Regional Council in terms of our responses. We do also echo Mr. Corey's responses that we do appreciate staff's work on the MCR. We have been an active participant both in writing and through the open houses, and certainly happy to be here before you this afternoon as part of the statutory public meeting process. So if we could ask for the second slide to be put up, please. So the three parcels of which I wanted to speak to Regional Council today are identified on the attached slide. So moving from south to north, we have a parcel of land that's located at the southwest corner of Steeles Avenue West and Financial Drive. That parcel is approximately 2.4 hectares in size. The second parcel, moving northwards, is at the northwest corner of Steeles Avenue and Financial Drive, or otherwise known as the northeast corner of Mississauga Road and Steeles Avenue. That is a much larger parcel. It's approximately 16 hectares in size. And then the third parcel, of which you can see identified, is on the east side of Mississauga Road, immediately abutting Wardsville Avenue, or Wardsville Drive, excuse me, on the north side. Those are the three parcels that we wanted to speak to Regional Council today, in particular for a request that we have already made in writing, have spoken to staff about, and are wanting to present to Regional Council today. Next slide, please. So on Schedule Y6, which is to delineate the employment lands, you can see the three parcels identified in red there. Each of the three parcels are proposed to be included within the employment designation. And one of our requests that we are asking for, if we can move to the next slide, please, is, I guess, twofold. So the first one you can see on the left-hand side of the slide is to remove the three parcels from the employment designation on Schedule Y. The reason why we are requesting them to be removed out of the employment designation is to permit mixed-use development. So although the request is to remove it from the employment designation, it is not to remove employment uses. The intention, which you'll see in a further slide, is that we do envision as part of the concept plans for these three parcels is to still provide employment uses, but provide it within a range of mix of uses and primarily high density residential. The other ask that we are specifically asking for on the right-hand side of the slide is, as Mr. Smith noted in his presentation, that there's identified planned major transit station areas, and those are identified in that dashed circle. So the lands, the two parcels of which that we're dealing with today, which is at the northwest corner of Financial and Steeles and the southwest corner, are planned within the 800-meter radius of a planned major transit station area, which is known as Hub-3. And our other request is, given the significant size of these lands and the proposed mixed-use development that we're suggesting, we are believing, or of the belief, excuse me, that it should be designated as a primary major transit station area. And when we move to the next slide, you'll see why we are specifically asking that question. Thank you for that. This is a concept plan that my client has commissioned through Quadrangle. And so starting from the smaller parcel on the southwest corner of Financial Drive and Steeles is a range of uses. So we have, at the very southerly end, we have a range of 4 stories. And as you move along the frontage of Steeles Avenue West, they range in height from 12 to 14 stories. So that would be a significant high-density residential development portion, while also keeping in context the lands immediately to the south with a range of different heights. And you can also see there's an orange color right at the corner of Financial and Steeles on the southwest corner, and that would provide some retail opportunities. So it would be a true mixed-use building in that location. The larger northerly block, if we move from Mississauga Road to in a counterclockwise fashion, so the two buildings you see fronting onto Mississauga Road would be 2 5-story office buildings. The larger peachy color building that fronts directly onto Steeles Avenue West is for seniors housing. That would accommodate approximately 590 units of seniors housing. Immediately to the east of that, in the grayish color building, is an affordable housing block that would provide approximately 270 affordable housing units. And then to the east of that, you see a range of heights, anywhere with 6-story podiums, all the way from 12 to 16 stories, with retail at the ground floor. And as you go, again, counterclockwise along Financial Drive and Olivia Marie, we again have a range of different housing forms and heights to provide a true compact mixed-use development. And interesting enough, what I caught from Mr. Smith's presentation, specifically as it related to the climate change policies that the regional staff are looking to incorporate as part of the amendment, is to look for higher density, compact, transit-oriented developments that provide a range of uses. And that's exactly what this proposal is for these two larger blocks in their locations. We think that exactly meets what regional staff are looking for. In fact, we did file a pre-consultation request to meet with regional and local staff. They were, of course, generally supportive of our ideas, but of course there was policy issues that we had to address, and that's obviously one of the reasons why we are delegating before Regional Council today as part of the public meeting process with the MCR. As it relates to the third one, if we can move to the next slide, please. We have what is also another mixed-use building, and this this typology would be constructed on the block that's immediately adjacent to Mississauga Road, north of Wardsville. And in fact, if you drive Mississauga Road today, immediately north of Olivia Marie Road, you can see this exact same format of housing form and mixed-use development that's built and is very successful there today. And our request is to replicate this for the block north of Wardsville. Currently, it's a vacant block, and we believe this type of development, again, transit supportive, higher density, mixed use, which sort of meets all the criteria, is certainly appropriate and would bode well for that block and the frontage along that area. So next slide, please. So with that, Councillor, Chair Ayanna, that we really want to just provide you with an overview today of our request. We thought a visual presentation might be best to really give you an indication of the three parcels that we're looking for to have some further discussions. And with that, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that Regional Council may have regarding our request.
Keith, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm confirming that I have no questions at this time, so thank you once again. That brings me to our next listed deputant, listed as 6.3, Christine Fang-Denisov, Principal, Urban Strategies, Inc., on behalf of Smart Centers Real Estate Investment Trust regarding the designation of certain properties owned by Smart Centers as employment areas as identified in the draft of regional plan policies and mapping. Christine.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you so much, Chair and members of Council today for the opportunity to speak. As you've mentioned, I'm a planner and a principal with Urban Strategies. And similar to the previous deputants, we've been tracking the region of Peel's official plan review and really want to reiterate the exceptional work that has been done to date. Today, we have requested to speak briefly and have prepared a brief presentation on behalf of Smart Centers with regard to various properties located in the region, specifically as it relates to the mapping of employment areas. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with Smart Centers. Next slide, please. Smart Centers owns and manages large shopping centers throughout the GTA, Ontario, and Canada. Many of their sites are emblematic of this image here. They tend to be anchored by major retail tenants like the Walmart in this image and encircled with a variety of other retail uses. While these sites provide an important role to the communities they serve, Smart Centers in the past several years have been thinking critically about the future of their lands, especially because there's been an overall transition in the retail market that has seen a reduction in the demand for brick and mortar retail space. In about 2015, Smart Centers set out on a mission to transform their sites from traditional auto-oriented shopping centers to complete mixed-use city centers. Next slide, please. The ambition is to evolve every property in their portfolio with a wider mix of uses to better serve their communities in a more sustainable and compact form. Specifically, they're interested in three things. One, providing a broader mix of non-residential uses. While they do continue to plan to provide retail spaces, they are interested in broadening their portfolio with office, light industrial uses like storage facilities, and other commercial uses. Second, they're also interested in introducing broader housing choices, including affordable housing, condos, apartments, senior residences, and hotels. And finally, they're really, really interested in developing plans that focus on the creation of place. They're thinking at the beginning of their planning for sites about the provision of parks, community amenities, and other social infrastructure. And in fact, Smart Centers has initiated a $13.1 billion program to undertake this transformation across their land holdings. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Smart Centers has significant land holdings in Mississauga, and they're really eager to bring forward some of this transformation throughout the city. And Urban Strategies has been hired to look at 5 of their sites throughout specifically the city of Mississauga. There are 5 sites in total. You'll see them kind of outlined here on this map. All of these sites are well served by transit. They're either within existing or planned transit station areas and are either within or within very close proximity to intensification areas. Specifically, there are 2 sites that are here outlined in red, 1225 Dundas Street and 2555 Dixie Avenue. We have been monitoring the draft official plan mapping, and these sites are not shown as employment areas. And we're very supportive of this, as this is consistent with the work that the City of Mississauga has undertaken and the recommendations from Dundas Connects. Next slide, please. But there are 3 other sites here, kind of the black circles outlined in the yellow shapes here, that are within the draft regional official plan policies and mapping. And given the sizes and relationships of these sites to strategic growth areas, we're of the opinion that a broader mix of uses are appropriate here, and we are requesting that these lands be removed from employment areas. We've begun early conversations with the region and the city, and just wanted to briefly walk you through some early concepts for these sites to demonstrate how they align with other broader city building objectives that the region is trying to secure through their official plan. Next slide, please. The first site is 1100 Burnhamthorpe. Next slide, please. The site is a large site with substantial frontage along Burnhamthorpe and Central Parkway West. It's exceptionally strategically located, given that it's within a planned MTSA and within 200 meters of the Arundel GO station. As you can see in this image, the site is underutilized today. It is occupied by low-scale retail uses with significant surface parking. The next slide shows our preliminary development concept for the site. Next slide, please. We are imagining a full mix of uses on this site. What we're imagining is replacing the employment and the jobs that are on this site with a mix of office, retail, and light industrial uses, but introducing a broader mix of uses as well. So we're imagining a mix of housing forms, including affordable housing. But importantly, too, we're also imagining the creation of a central linear open space, kind of anchored by a community use. You can see there in the kind of purple towards the west of the site. Next slide, please. If you look at the site today, we do think that there is a tremendous opportunity to reinvigorate the retail and service uses that exist on the site today and come forward with a proposal that transforms a low-density, single-use and auto-oriented site to one that has higher density, transit-supportive uses, pedestrian forms, and a mix of other city building objectives that align with what the region is trying to do with the official plan. So if you go to the next slide, please. We have a conceptual rendering of what our concept looks like here, and we think that the transformation of this site has the opportunity to deliver density near transit, to deliver a full mix of uses, to deliver on social infrastructure, open spaces, and a bunch of other objectives that the region is trying to achieve. Next slide, please. The second of 3 sites that I'll walk you through is 780 Burnhamthorpe. Next slide, please. This site is located just east of the previous site that I just spoke about. It is also large in size with, again, substantive frontage along Burnham-Thorpe Street. This site is really interesting in that it's located between two strategic growth areas in the region. It's within close proximity to that same GO station, but it's also right on the periphery of the city of Mississauga's urban growth center boundary. And you can see today that this site is, again, low scale, single use, and predominated by surface parking. If you would go to the next slide, please. We have also developed a preliminary concept plan for this site. And what we're trying to do here is introduce a mix of uses with mixed use residential and retail buildings that front onto Burnham-Thorpe, light industrial spaces that buffer against the adjacent employment areas to the south, and again, a central kind of open space with space for open spaces, community amenity, and a really strong public realm that ties the whole site together. Next slide, please. Again, we think the redevelopment of the site from a low density, single use and auto-oriented form with a fuller mix of uses, again, aligns with the direction in the region official plan. And then just briefly with the last slide, we do have a rendering that kind of shows the vision for this site, which is again focusing on trying to deliver and maintain, if not grow, the amount of jobs that the site achieves right now, but also introducing housing choices, open spaces, and community amenities in a form that again, promotes travel patterns that shift away from private automobile use and really focus on creating complete communities. And the final site that I'll walk you through is on the next slide. This is the largest of the sites that we're looking at. This is the Smart Centers Meadowvale site at the northwest corner of the city of Mississauga. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a substantive sized retail complex right now. It is also strategically located. It is immediately adjacent to the Lisgar GO station and is within a planned MTSA area. As you can see, the site is occupied by low-scale retail uses with substantive surface parking. And it's important to note that some of these retail uses have been vacant for quite some time and are vacant right now. So again, they do demonstrate that they aren't being utilized well and are still really not an optimal use of land, given their relationship to transit infrastructure as well as the highway. The next slide shows our preliminary development concept for this site. The ambition here is to introduce a broader mix of uses in a compatible built form, really aligned along Argentia Road, which is a key spine that connects Lisgar GO Station to Winston Churchill Boulevard. The idea is to really focus this street as a pedestrian-oriented street with a mix of uses, including office, retail, community uses, park space, and a mix of housing typologies from townhouse to mid-rise to tall building forms. We're also interested in exploring affordable housing in this location, as well as community services and facilities. The idea is to really focus and really draw on the investment in transit in this location and to introduce greater transit supportive densities along this spine, while also maintaining and preserving a portion of the retail format uses that are just to the west of the site, because those do kind of continue to perform an important role for the community. However, the demand for the space is just not quite as substantive as it has been in previous years. Next slide, please. So again, we have an image of the site today, and we do think that there's a tremendous opportunity to transform this site, which is exceptionally located to transit and highway infrastructure, to one on the next slide, if you wouldn't mind advancing it, with a full mix of uses, higher densities, a more compact and active transportation-oriented built form. We think that all of these sites have the potential to accommodate the residential growth as well as the job growth that the region is forecasting for to 2051. We think there's a tremendous opportunity to deliver on a number of policy objectives, including sustainability, trying to introduce affordable housing, promoting transit-oriented development, and complete communities. And so my very last slide, I promise. Planning staff, we understand, are in the process of considering a number of employment conversion requests. And so we are asking that the region consider these 3 sites as they continue to undertake their land assessment needs, as we think that they meet all the tests in terms of land employment conversion requests. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. We have questions. Councillor Parrish.
Right through you, Mr. Chair. It's not a question. I just am delighted to see some focus on Mississauga because of the number of people we're going to be taking in the intensification. And I want to thank them very much for their presentation. That was very interesting.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Christine, I'll thank you for your delegation as well. Bringing us to 6.4, David Sylvester, President, Works of the Credit Preservation Group, Inc., regarding the protection of water resources and aggregate extraction policies as part of the PL 2051 Regional Official Plan. David.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of council. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can. Please proceed.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm David Sylvester, president of the not-for-profit community group, as you mentioned, in West Caledon, called Forks of the Credit Preservation Group. Thanks for this opportunity. I'll be brief, less than 10 minutes. Hopefully, you've all read my submission for today, so I promise I won't bore you by reading that again. I'm here to talk primarily about water. Peel Region and Caledon in particular are blessed with an abundance of ground and surface water resources, and certainly the most visible and important part of these resources, in my opinion, is the Credit River, a marvelous asset for our region. Unfortunately, adverse impacts on water resources is a growing problem, and aggregate strip mining is a big part of that. At the moment, 100% of the active aggregate pits in Peel are located in Caledon. Currently, we have 22 of them, and the proposals for more pits just keep on coming. So as it turns out, we now are in Caledon are faced with a proposal for a massive new quarry involving 800 acres, excavating and blasting below the water table more than 80 feet deep. So if you will, picture an 8-story building. How to manage our precious water resources? We're asking, among other things, that cumulative impact studies be completed for our subwatersheds. And as it turns out, the requirements for these studies are in fact already in our OP, but they haven't been acted upon, and I cannot explain why. Also, the system for permits to take water is far from optimal, and we're asking for improvements, including objective third-party monitoring. Should these permits to take water be included in the cumulative impact studies? Absolutely. I think this would be a big step in the right direction. The issue of aggregate extraction below the water table. Regrettably, a recent provincial policy statement has now blocked municipal oversight of this activity and handed control over to the MNRF. Why would they do such a thing? I have no idea, but it's now a big problem for Caledon, and we're asking the region to step in and help us. I'm going to provide some context here, if I may. The town of Caledon has a population of about 80,000, with a planning department overwhelmed with work. Peel Region has a population of about 1.5 million, with a more sophisticated and a far larger planning department. The Brazilian company that is proposing this new quarry in Caledon, they'll spend many millions of dollars on this application over many years, and it will likely end at an LPAT hearing. We fear that Caledon is simply not equipped to deal with this, and we need your help. Lastly, I'm going to ask your planning department to implement minimum separation distances for new or expanding aggregate operations. Now, the concept is straightforward. We all want to avoid land use planning conflicts, and to do that, we're suggesting a setback of 500 meters for pits and a setback of 1,000 meters for blasting quarries. Does this idea have legs or support? Well, I can tell you last month, we delegated at the PL Planning and Growth Committee meeting, and this concept of setbacks came up, but we didn't bring it up. As it turns out, two of the regional councillors initiated the discussion, and Chair Ayanna was also on board. Let me just say that if your planners are able to implement this policy into your revised OP, they'll be heroes in Caledon. And I'd like to finish by making an observation today, if I may. I note that all the other delegates this afternoon represent developers, and based on my limited experience here, that's not unusual. And that's nobody's fault, I might add. I think PL has done a reasonable job of doing what they can to make these meetings user-friendly. And maybe this is just an inherent limitation of the democratic system that we have. My point is there's a vast silent majority out there with no voice, and I realize there's no easy fix for that. I also realize the job of councillors and planners is difficult enough. But please be aware that the voices you do hear in these meetings don't often speak for the silent majority. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. We have a question. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, through you, Chair Ayanna, to the delegation. Some of your points in the actual written.
Ian, you're breaking up a bit. I think you've gone off of the visual. If you get off the visual and
concern water,
that may help.
Fairly with your
Ian, if you can hear me, I can't hear you.
I don't know where I broke up, so, well.
Start again. You sound good now. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, David Sylvester and your group. And in your written presentation, there are a number of policy implications for water. And I wondered if your intention is to bring more specific policy recommendations for consideration into the regional official plan.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair, through you, Chair Ayanna. This whole process of planning and aggregate issues is very complex. The learning curve is rather steep. However, to answer your question, yes, we do intend to submit more detailed documentations with more specific requests regarding water policies, and hopefully we will have that in the coming weeks.
All right, then. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair Ayanna.
Thank you. And David, in thanking you for your presentation, just a couple of other points I could make, if I may. First of all, you come here to sympathetic ears. It was intriguing to me, and I wrote it down. You said, Caledon is not equipped to deal with this, and I would disagree with you because you have the most important person in the room on your side, Ian Sinclair, and he's a formidable force, and he's brought this to the chair's attention. We've already had meetings with some of the proponents, and we've let them know, far from rolling out the red carpet, we need them to go, let's just say there's quite a standard of care we expect from them, and those discussions are ongoing because this thing is a behemoth. And that is understood by us. So you're speaking to sympathetic ears, and I do want to give Councillor Sinclair a pat on the back. It was more than a year ago he brought this to the chair's attention, and we've been working with staff and with the proponents to say, you've got a lot of work to do before anything comes to pass. So we appreciate your efforts, your comments, and you've been well received, if I may say. Okay, moving on, that brings me to Deputation 6.5, Paul Lowe's, Principal, SGL Planning and Design, Inc., on behalf of Wildfield Village Landowner Group, providing comments on the PL 2051 Regional Official Plan. Paul.
Afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. A pleasure to be before you this afternoon. As the chair indicated, my name is Paul Lowe's, and I'm a principal with the firm of SGL Planning and Design, a planning firm. And we represent the Wildfield Village Landowners Group. Just kind of a short slide presentation. If we could go to the next slide, please. So Wildfield Landowners Group are located within an area that we call the Wildfield Village, approximately 329 hectares of land. Located, and you see in the red dashed area on the map, this is of your ROPA map, with the subject lands identified. Located generally between Bolton, which is to the east, Tullamore to the west, centrally located between those two areas. The draft ROPA and the SABE study identifies Wildfield Village as community lands. We're very supportive of that identification. And as other delegates have said today, we commend staff for their thorough review. There's a substantial amount of work that's been done. We've reviewed it all those thousands of pages, and we're supportive of staff's recommendation to you. This area, the Wildfield Village area, represents the western expansion of Bolton, as well as a northern expansion of existing areas developed in Brampton. As such, it's easily served with the extension of water and wastewater infrastructure. If we can go to the next slide, I can demonstrate that a little bit more, please. You can see on the map that this is an extension, really, of the Vales of Humber community, which is just finishing completion to the south. So it's a logical extension of that urban area, and will be a logical extension westward of Bolton. You can see that the wastewater services are on the arterial roads to the south. Water is being extended. We also have transit along McVean and Gore that would be extended. We can have transit supportive densities along those routes. Really, this plan optimizes infrastructure and optimizes the road pattern. And we can see that the collector roads can be extended north into the site, with east and west collector roads extending to the new communities east and west of this area. Next slide, please. Just to try and give you a visualization, because Adrian and Mr. Smith and his staff have done a great job identifying the expansions, but they're blob colors, and we want to just give you what this could look like. This is just a conceptual illustration of what this new community could look like. It's kind of the thinking of the landowners group at this time. Certainly, we'll be working with Caledon staff to bring this community to life. But really, what we're looking at is a true mixed-use community with a mixed-use village center at the heart of the community, the center of the community, surrounding a central neighborhood park, really creating a true 15-minute neighborhood, as you've heard planners talk about, where residents can get all their daily needs within a 15-minute walk of their home. It includes a full range of housing, and it aligns closely with Hempson's identification for their planned mix of low, medium, and high density. It's very close to that, which it achieves approximately 6,700 new residential units, 21,000 people and jobs, and achieves the density target that you put in the ROPA of 65, or your staff have recommended, of 65 residents and jobs per hectare. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to close that Wildfield Village is ideally situated to create a complete community to meet the growing needs of the region. It's ideally suited to create a low-cost, serviceable extension to your communities, both from the west and from the east and westward to Bolton, and from the south and the northern extension. And Wildfield Village Landowners Group are supportive of staff direction that identifies the lands as community lands. We're very supportive of the ROPA as written. And just want to close it. In our opinion, Wildfield Village represents a logical first phase of western expansion of Bolton, and we urge staff to consider that when they work on the phasing policies. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for the time, and appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm just checking to see. Councillor Innes has a question. Councillor Innes.
Thank you for the presentation. If you go back to your your site plan there that you've shown, the northern boundary, you've allowed for a section of medium density abutting the GTA West corridor. And I'm just wondering on your thoughts in regards to perhaps having commercial as a transition to the highway, as opposed to having medium density abutting a corridor like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Innes. We're more than happy to work with Caledon staff, with your staff, to determine what the appropriate land uses are. This is a conceptual vision for the land. Commercial, though, is as we all recognize the issues with commercial, and it's been waning. We're trying to provide for commercial, but more in a mixed-use setting. But we're happy to look at what the appropriate land uses should be if the GTA West corridor goes through to the northern boundary land, and explore all potential opportunities, commercial or different types of residential mixed use.
Thank you, and I look forward to having those discussions when we start the actual secondary plan process. But I do see this as a logical spot at this point in time, but I do have some concerns about what will be abutting. You say if. The province has been quite clear that highway, that corridor, as well as the transmission corridor, will be in existence. I think we also heard in the statement today by the province that there are additional funds for acquisitions along that corridor. So we know it's moving forward, and we just need. I'd like, when we see these plans coming forward, that we keep that in the forefront, so that we are building complete communities where people do want to live, work, and play. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There are no further questions for the delegates. So Paul, thank you for your presentation. Now, Madam Clerk, over to you. I believe from my end, this exhausts all our oral submissions today. Madam Clerk, can you confirm we've dealt with all the oral submissions, please?
Yes, we've had no further notifications of any other oral submissions at this time. Thank you.
Very good. So I also want to acknowledge then the written submissions we've had. To date, we've had 32 written submissions for the proposed official plan amendment. At this time, are there any other written submissions to be presented, Madam Clerk?
We've received no other written submissions beyond the 32. Thank you.
Okay, but I will note going forward that written submissions can be made at any time to the Region of Peel clerk at regional.clerk@peelregion.ca up to and until the close of today's public meeting, and written submissions received after the public meeting can still be submitted through peelplan@peelregion.ca up to November 31st. Before my closing remarks, I do want to acknowledge, because some of you may or may not be able to see all my colleagues, but I want to acknowledge my council colleagues who took the afternoon, I think this is our fourth meeting of the day, to be in with us today. So I want to acknowledge Councillor Daskell, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Downey, Councillor Innes, Councillor Carlson, Councillor Sinclair, Councillor Kovac, and Councillor Vincente, who were present and accounted for today to listen to this very important presentation. So if you haven't seen them, I at least wanted them acknowledged. I want to acknowledge Adrian Smith and the staff at the region for the tremendous amount of work they've done to keep this thing moving forward. So I want to say thanks there as well. And with that, with regards to my closing remarks, I again thank all the speakers for your interest and presentation during this meeting. The written comments together with those oral submissions expressed at this meeting have been noted and will be included in a final report to be considered by Regional Council. Additional comments should be filed with the region by November 30th, 2021, in order to be included by staff in the final report to council, which is targeted for early 2020. I want to reemphasize that because at the close of meetings, people often ask next steps. Next steps is the report that we hope to see to council in early 2020. This brings to a conclusion the public meeting regarding the proposed amendment to the Region of Peel official plan known as PL2051. I hereby declare the public meeting officially closed, again with thanks to all.